morning, everybody. Please rise. We will bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow. Rise. Second bow. Rise. Third bow. Rise. And half bow. Allow me to offer. Please be seated. Make yourself comfortable. Either half lotus flower or full lotus flower. If you're new, this is the first time. Either left foot over right thigh, or right thigh over left foot. As long as you're comfortable. Or the full lotus flower is both feet under the palms. If you cannot sit in the lotus flower position, you may sit on a chair if that makes you feel more comfortable. Right hand over left palm, thumbs slightly joint, back straight, elbows out, breathe in and out, breathe in and out, breathe in one more time and out. Visualize that your body is sitting here. You know that your physical body is sitting here. Visualize impermanence. One day, the body will grow old. It will die. The bones and flesh will be separated. Everything will turn into dust. Wind blows through and takes it all over.光想慈悲，光想无常，光想这个身体无常，有一天身体会变老、生病而死亡，肌肉及骨骼会分离及腐朽，最后慢慢变成灰尘。风吹，灰尘就会吹得如雨雨中，到底还有什么值得执着？Visualize impermanence to prevent attachment to this physical body. Breathing out of positive energy, breathe out all the stress and tension. Stress tensions from the feet, the knees, the thighs, the lower back, upper back, elbows, shoulders, neck. Breathe out all stress and tension. Open. Next, slightly tilted down, looking forward. Straight, elbows out. Breathe in, remember breathing in. Breathing only. Breathe out the effort. 安住呼吸，安住佛法。吸入时就知道自己在吸气，呼出时就知道自己在呼气。Open in yourself breath. 安住呼吸，安住佛法。吸入时就知道自己在吸气，念阿弥；呼出时就知道自己在呼气，念佛佛。Moving with spiritual gravity, loving kindness. When you wish to radiate loving kindness towards yourself, your friends and family, neutral persons, cashiers, mailmen, strangers, and foes and enemies, and all sentient beings. Massage your arms, feet, your thighs. 继续按照呼吸呼吸 Continue to maintain awareness of your breathing. Continue to massage your feet until you feel sensation. So this way we can stand up and then fall. With this little tingling sensation, just continue to sit. Helps to massage the knees, the thighs, the feet. Alright, if you have completely recovered, please slowly rise. And we will bow to the Buddha 3 times to show respect. Slowly. 慢起来。First bow. Rise. Second bow. Rise. And third bow. Rise. And half bow. Amida. Alright, we have already set up on the other side, so we should be able to start on time at 10 o'clock for the lecture. We'll see you briefly. Will you rise? I will face the Buddha and bow 3 times. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida. Please be seated. If you could please join your palms together, we recite Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it
receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. All right. This is what we are in the Amida Sutra, the nadir direction. And we have been talking about the Lion Buddha and the meaning of the Buddha's name, representing the strength and confidence in propagating the truth. And that takes us to understanding the three Jews, the three pillars of Buddhism: the Buddha Jew, the Dharma Jew, and the Sangha Jew. And we have been talking about the Dharma Jew. And the last part of the Dharma Jews that I like to share with you is the reality that the Buddha attained. And those are dukkha, impermanence, and emptiness of individual self. And the next part is liberation. Liberation is another element of reality. So this is an excerpt from Shankaracita's book. He explains what liberation is about. There are three components to liberation, or so-called the three liberations, or three doors of liberation. First is that in order to be liberated, we have to rise above the conditioned phenomena. And so seeing the conditioned existence, seeing life as invariably subject to suffering, to impermanence, and to emptiness of self is called vipassana, or vipassana, which is translated loosely into insight, which is wisdom. So vipassana is a form of meditation that allows you to uncover your wisdom. In meditation, there are primarily two components. One is samantha, which is samantha here, which means calming meditation. And that is tranquility. That makes the body and mind feel very comfortable and joyful. But in Buddhism, it doesn't stop there. Other forms of meditation practice stops there. They dwell in this meditative bliss, and they can never rise above that. But in Buddhism, samantha is a base, a foundation for wisdom to arise, and that's called vipassana. Okay. So insight is not just an intellectual understanding, according to Shankaracita, but it can be developed only through the basis of controlled, purified, elevated, concentrated, integrated mind through meditative practice. In other words, you cannot go to school, read a textbook, and say you have wisdom. That's not how wisdom is. That's not how insight is. Because there are many smart, intelligent people who still make mistakes. So insight here allows you to see through things very clearly so that you can see and differentiate between mistakes and skillful versus unskillful. Something that's right, something that's wrong. And so insight is different from academic knowledge. And the only way to really see insight, to be able to see things clearly, and to see things clearly, you need to have a meditative mind. Meaning the mind cannot be biased. If the mind is biased, then it is no longer meditative. Cannot have, because it's being disturbed. Okay? So insight is the direct intuitive perception that takes place in the depths of meditation. And I don't mean to say here that you should not study, you should not read textbooks. And of course, that helps too. That helps to reinforce understanding. But it really boils down to how true we are to that study, and not study to gain. If you study to gain prestige, then that is not insight, no matter how smart, because that's still within the control of the ego. And so it is through intuitive perception when the ordinary mental processes have fallen into abeyance. So insight is something that transcends the intellectual workings of the mind. So we have to rise above the trickeries, if you will, of the consciousness. Because when we see something, we think it's right, but it's not. Even if you see something with your own eyes, it does not mean that that is the truth. And so that means we have to rise above the trickery of our consciousness. So in meditation, through insight, everything you experience through the five senses and through the mind, which would be the sixth sense, things that you can feel, touch, smell, and taste, and see, think about, is conditioned and subject to suffering and impermanence, and it is empty of self. So when you see these things in this way, you will have technically called revulsion or disgust. You turn away from the condition. Now, it is important here to note that this is a spiritual experience and not psychological reaction. So when we see something that we say that I've had enough with this word, I want to get away from this word, I hate this word. That is not the meaning here. When we say that we turn away from the condition, we don't hate it. An easy analogy is when you were a child, you loved your toys. But as you now you are grown up, you don't hate your toys, but you're not attached to your toys anymore. In fact, you can give out and share your toys with others because you have gone above that. So when we say that we have this disgust or revulsion, it's just a spiritual experience, not a psychological reaction. You don't have any emotions in hating it, but you rise above it. And so when you say you don't like this word, it doesn't mean that you hate this word, but it's just like you see it doesn't add any more to your pursuit. Your pursuit is much higher. Instead of for any more money that the word gives you, any more fame the word gives you, mean nothing to you because that is not what you're seeking. And so you're no longer attached to it, and therefore you want to move away from it. You're no longer attached to it. So it is very important to say that when we want to leave this world, it means spiritually, not psychologically, that you hate it, you avoid your responsibility and so forth, that you don't want to deal with the people that you hate. That's not what it means here. So you turn away not because you are personally repelled by those things, but because you see the condition is not worth having it. It's no longer adding any more value to your pursuit, to your goal. Therefore, just like the toy that you used to love, it gave you a lot of happiness when you were young, gave you comfort, but it's no longer adding any more value than your goal that you're pursuing. So you don't hate the toy. In fact, you can easily give it away to any child who may need it, right? So it's very easy to let go that way. So when we let go spiritually, it's easy to let go versus psychologically when you're forced to let go. When you're forced to let go, that means there's something inside that does not want you to let go, and it's going to make it very difficult. Initially, you'll be able to let it go, but you keep thinking about it. You're reminiscent about it. You think about it. You miss it. Eventually, you're going to be attached to it. So physically, you are detached from it, but mentally, psychologically, you are attached to it still. So there is still attachment. So when we react psychologically, it's not foolproof. But when we rise above it through spiritual experience, then we can easily let go because we see that it's no longer adding value to our pursuit. So turning away from the condition. So that's what I meant was so quickly for those that didn't share the screen here. But meditation leads to insight, and that allows you to see things very clearly. And so you start to turn away from the conditioned phenomena, and you can say it's revulsion, disgust, because it no longer adds to your pursuit, your goal. But again, this is just a psychological, this is just a spiritual experience, not a psychological reaction. Okay, and you turn away from it, not because you are personally repelled by those things, but because you see those conditioned phenomena as not having, it's not worth the value that you think. Okay, so turning away from the conditioned to the unconditioned takes place decisively, it is said that you enter a stream leading to nirvana. So once you see the condition as being not worth having because it leads to dukkha, it is impermanent, right? There's no true self to it. It's not something you can own forever. It will change. It's the emptiness of the self, meaning that there is no one single element that makes up of it. It has to require many criteria, many external internal conditions to create it. And when things are created by conditions, then things can be taken away by conditions. And so when you see those things, you start to repel from it. So what that means is when we experience, as we go through life, and we have difficulties at work, at home, with our cars and so forth, our house, whatever problems you have, you may have plumbing problems. You come home at night, 11 o'clock in the middle of the night, and your bathroom is flooded, and you have to wake up early in the morning to go to work. In that situation, it's very easy to cause rise to anger, frustrations. But we should understand that, well, we have this flood because of the bathroom that we have, and we have this bathroom because of the house, and we have this house because we so desire to have this house. So we should accept things to break. Nothing lasts forever. But because we still have merits, we have enough financial resources to clean it up, right? Maybe spend some time to clean it up, and it'll be over, and we can move on. But by blaming, by having frustration, it's not going to help the situation, because we know that by having things, that things will decay. So that's impermanence. There's no true self in it, because that frustration is not true. That frustration is caused by the conditions, the flooded bathroom. So that frustration does not reside with you forever. That frustration will go away once the problem is resolved. So when we see things very clearly, we can subside our frustration. We can neutralize our frustration. And that that's the path towards nirvana, because a nirvana is a state of no suffering. So if we can neutralize our suffering, then we are closer to the state of nirvana. Right? Nirvana is not an address that you punch into your GPS to get you there, but it's a state of being. But if how your mind is can influence the environment. So at this point, we have to guard against misunderstanding. Right? Some schools of Buddhism think of the conditioned and unconditioned as though they were two separate, different entities. And that leads to dualism. But it is in this case, according to Sankarsita, it isn't that on one hand you have conditioned, and on the other hand you have unconditioned. It's not like you go from one place to another to find condition. It's not like you leave conditioned to find unconditioned. Or it's not like there is a vast gap between them. Some Buddhist schools even say that the unconditioned is the condition itself when the condition is seen in its ultimate depths, or in a new, higher dimension. The unconditioned is reached by knowing the condition deeply enough, by going through the bottom of the condition and coming out the other side, so to speak. So in other words, two sides of the same coin. So the conditions and unconditioned from some Buddhist schools, we see that they're really same side, two sides of the same coins. Because you're in that situation, that frustration that you have because of your broken down car or your flooded bathroom, that is conditioned because you are reacting to it. You cause rise to frustration. But the moment that you have insight and you see the impermanence and the void of the self of that frustration is not real, and you start to feel uplifted again, because you know that it's not the end. That frustration, that suffering is not going to be with you forever, and you have a way to find it. And you call a plumber, the plumber 24-hour service comes right away, resolves your issues. An hour later, an hour and a half later, or 2 hours later, the bathroom is clean now, Right now you feel relief. So now that frustration is no longer there. But now you are on the other side of the no suffering. So it's the same thing, it's same you, the same house, so to speak. But then you see things very differently. And so are you in a different dimension now? Are you a different person now? Not necessarily. Right? You just change that perspective. But you see things very differently. The problem was still there. It was there. You just have resolved it. Right? It's not like somebody came in and made the problem vanish. But you put effort into it. You provided the right conditions to resolve the problem. So it's not like you sprinkle some magic dust and make the flood go away. But you put in effort, you put in the right condition to resolve it. So this perspective, which is very important, one to take in, and is brought into focus by teaching the common to all schools called Vimosa, or liberation, the three doors of liberation. So when we have that perspective, it leads to liberation. Not that we're running away from things in order to have liberation, but it leads to liberation because we have seen the reality, and we have understood reality, the different components of reality. Right? And the three doors through which we can approach enlightenment. So through these three doors, that it will lead us to enlightenment, to liberation. So the first of these liberation is called apradihita, the unaiming or unbiased. See? So this is called the unbiased. And so that's the first of the three doors. The three doors through which we can approach enlightenment. So the first one is unbiased. It is a mental state without any inclination in any direction, without likes or dislikes, perfectly still, perfectly poised. And this is how the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism explains the apranihita, the unbiased, wishless, if you will, door of liberation. So this is called wishless. No, there's no bias in it. And once it's been exposed of the danger, once we understand the danger of being being attached to the conditioned phenomena, then through our senses, that we lose all desire for the compounded things. The things that different things make up the condition. Compounded here is conditioned things of the world, and avert instead towards uncompounded or unconditioned, which is nirvana. So the wishless is produced through insight into suffering, serves as the counter agent to all intentions and aspirations one has towards any compounded dharma. So once you see the intrinsic nature of things, that they are impermanent, they are dukkha, then you really don't want to be so attached to those things, because it will lead to dukkha, it will lead to dissatisfaction, because it's impermanent. Because impermanence, that things will change. Whatever you try to protect so much, it will change. You cannot preserve its original state, and eventually it will lead to disappointment, dissatisfaction. Therefore, you don't want in it, because for example, knowing that getting to a deal that where you're going to lose money, you're not going to invest your time investing in it. And so it leads you towards something better. So nirvana can only be attained once the meditator no longer has any desire for anything, including nirvana itself. So that's how this dictionary, the Princeton dictionary, explains the unbiased. And again, this doesn't mean that one doesn't have any any motivation. It just one is so perfectly still, just like a ball, if you will, on a very level plane. But if you tilt it, it'll lean. But if there's no need to tilt, it'll stay in its place perfectly. Doesn't mean that it cannot move, right? So it is an approach to the inconditioned, but it is an approach which is by way of not going in any particular direction. There's no egoistic motivation to acquire anything. That's what it means. There is no egoistic control behind that action. A bodhisattva who has achieved this can still speak, can still think, can still behave normally. But in behind that deed, that action, there is no egoistic motivation. That's what it means. You only want to go in a particular directions when you have a concept of that direction. So if somebody needs help, you go and help that person. But there is no hidden agenda to earn merits from helping that person or to gain a favor that person. If there's no particular directions in which you want to go, then you just, as it were, stay at rest. It's perfectly round, just like a perfectly round sphere on a perfectly flat, level plane. Absolutely level. Perfect sphere, doesn't roll in any particular directions. So it's called directionless. It's kind of like that. So absolute equanimity, at peace, joy, and no egoistic motive for doing or not doing anything. So this is an avenue of approach to reality enlightenment. So let me expand on this a little bit here. By directionless, I don't mean this to be, it's not the same as lack of hope or purpose. Because a person who lacks hope and purpose can easily be led to depression. A person who doesn't, that's usually why people encounter midlife crisis, because they live all their lives, and then when they get to about their midlife, they see hopelessness, they see purposelessness in their lives, and they don't know what to do, and that leads to depression. So depression is the disease, the restriction, and it leads to suffering. Liberation, on the other hand, is freedom. So even beyond the worldly inspiration and joy, which leads to equanimity, that you even release that joy, that worldly joy, to achieve true equanimity. Right. So directionless here is very positive. It's not negative in any sense. It's just directionless here. There is no egoistic motivation behind what one does, like in person. Okay. Any comments? Right. So that's the first door to liberation. The second door to liberation is the animita, or signless, 不相, signless. So, which means is an approach to the unconditioned by bypassing all words and all thoughts. Because that state of being cannot be described by the language that we learn, because language, we attach to its meaning, so it's still constrained by the consciousness. But it has to go beyond that in order to free itself from the constraints of language and perceptions. So when you have that, you realize that all words and concepts are totally inadequate. Just like when you say you drink something warm, there are no words to really describe what that feeling is. So it's kind of like that. You have to experience it in order to understand right, how it is. So not that they are very not that they are very adequate, but they don't mean anything at all beyond that. So this is how the Princeton Dictionary describes animita. So it's signless, one of three gates of deliverance or freedom or liberation, refers to the generic appearance of an object. It produces recognitions or perceptions, which in turn leads to clinging or rejections and ultimately suffering. So when we attach to external appearance, generic appearance of it, then there is a bias in our preference, whether we like it or we hate it, and that leads to attachment or aversion, and then therefore ultimately suffering, because if we get it, we feel happy, right? It's consistent with our expectations. But once it changes and no longer meeting expectation, then that is dissatisfaction. So signlessness is crucial in the process of sensory restraint, a process in which one does not actively react to generic signs of an object, but instead seeks to halt the perceptual process at the level of simple recognition. So the first thing that you recognize, you just recognize that object, and you should stop there. So achieving this level of meditation does not mean that you don't have you don't see and you don't recognize the world. You still see and recognize the world. You still see and understand what that object is, but you stop there. You don't form your own bias, personal preferences on those objects. So in the brain, the first thing that when we see, we see, and for example, before you can formulate into words, right? Like you say, you look at a flower, you know it's a flower. Before you say it's a flower, you already know it's a flower. And when you see a yellow flower, then the next part of your brain will produce language. But the initial perception is pure. When we have a biased thinking, that's what it makes our perception impure. And so when we are attached to that personal preference, will taint our perception. So by not seizing on these signs, perception is maintained at a pure level prior to an object's conceptualizations, and then resulting in the proliferation of concepts. So we go right. We've gone beyond that concept, that bias perception. So in the scene, there is only the scene, not the impositions created by the intrusions of the ego. So when we see something, we know it is, but we don't have this egoistic drive, motivation to be attached to it or to have that aversion to run away from it. So mastery of this techniques of sensory restraint, right? When we see something, we restrain. When we hear something, we restrain, provides access to the signless gate to deliverance. So it is produced through insight into impermanence and serves as a counter agent to attachment to anything experienced through the senses. So here, this is a treatment to our limitations of the senses because of the attachment. So that's animita, signless. So one doesn't think, so this is another door through which one approaches the absolute, the unconditioned. The animita is a state in which one sees all concepts of reality. So in other words here, he says, one doesn't think about reality. And so I don't mean one doesn't think about it in an ordinary way in which one doesn't think about reality, but most of us, most of the time, don't give much thought up to reality at all. We don't, in other words, we don't stop to think why we are reacting this way. We drift through life. We react to the environments, to our thoughts, and we cause rise to either joy or dissatisfaction, and we continue to react. So what he's saying here is that we only live passively. We don't really live. We live in a reactive way that our lives moving forward, not because we want to move forward, but because we are reacting to the conditions, to pursue something because of our desires, right? But on the attainment of this liberation, one will have reached a level of reality but doesn't think about reality. One realizes that no words, no concepts can possibly apply. So therefore, it has gone beyond, you cannot categorize what in nirvana is, through your language to perceptions. So it's beyond that. So let me expand on this a little bit more. So a sign, a characteristic refers to generic appearance of an object, right? So when a sense organ interacts with an object, it produces recognitions. It produces recognitions or perceptions of that object, and which may in turn lead to clinging or rejection and ultimately suffering. So signless, like we talked about, is important for us to practice sensory restraint, not to have that attachment or the clinging or aversion so quickly. So by not seizing on these signs, perception is maintained at a pure level, right? And so, for example, let's say you see a homeless, a beggar living under a bridge. You recognize that his state of being is due to his past unskillful karma. He has nowhere to go, and he has to go through that experience of being a target of charity. Right? He cannot provide his own means of living freely, but he has to rely on others' giving. And so therefore he has to go through that experience of being the object of charity, other people's charity. So you can cause rise to compassion and giving, but you don't have pity on him. When you give, you don't give with pity. But you don't become angry of his family's mistreatment perhaps, or unfairness of society. You don't have that thinking that why is he going through this? Where's the government? Where's the help? You start blaming other people, start to have this unskillful thinking about this situation. So you see a person needing help, you just help them because it's the right thing to do, not because of your pity on that person or your frustration on the unfairness of society. Okay? Or you found yourself in an unfortunate situation, whether it be employment, health issues. You don't blame others or retreat from continuing your good deeds, but you understand conditionality and continue to do even more good deeds to overcome it. Right? The unfortunate situation that we're in, we say, I helped so many people, and now I'm facing this misfortune. You don't give up hope and say there's no point in doing goodness, but you continue because you understand the conditionality. You understand that because of your past unskillful deeds that you're in this situation, but you don't stop there. You continue on to overcome it because you know that by providing the proper conditions, there will be a way out. You can change things through proper conditions. Not give up and say there's no point in helping people. There's no point in practicing meditation. I have no joy from it. I get nothing out of it. And I just continue to encounter problems after problems. That kind of thinking is you're attached to the thinking that your future cannot change, that you are stuck. You relinquish your control over um, um, to that unchangeability. But there is change is possible by providing the right condition. So when we are attached, when we have this attachment to a concept that things cannot change, oh, I tried so much and I still continue to face disappointment. Therefore, I'm giving up. So we are attached to our concept, right? Our thinking, our false thinking that we cannot change the future. And because of that attachment, that we cannot be liberated. The third liberation. So let me go back here a little bit here. So let me just finish and then I'll expand on it. So the third liberation here is voidness or emptiness. So in this state, you see that everything is, as it were, completely transparent. Nothing has its own being, or nothing has any self-identity. So the emptiness. So let me expand on this a little bit more. Emptiness does not mean that things don't exist. All phenomena exist and become extinct based on conditions. When there are conditions for things to exist, things will exist. When there are conditions for things to decay and become extinct, they will decay and become extinct. When they exist, they have their purposes and their own values, whether good or bad, high or low. For example, like a piece of fabric, a piece of cloth, piece of fabric is just that. But once you make that piece of fabric into a flag, then it represents a nation, right? It is a place of high value. For like American flag, it represents bravery. It represents courage, and so forth. So, but if it's just a piece of cloth, then it's just that. But in other words, it's empty in the sense that it can change. That is not permanent. It's not set. And this is how the dictionary, Princeton Dictionary, explains sunyata, which is emptiness. Emptiness becomes an application of classical doctrines of no self or anatman beyond a person. It lacks or absence is a lack of absence of intrinsic nature. It does not exist on its own, right? And it's the final nature of all things, the ultimate truth, if you will. Emptiness is clearly neither nothingness nor the absence of existence, but rather the absence of falsely imagined types of existence. So in other words, we can say that this life is emptiness, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We have a life to live. We have responsibility. We have family. We have a job to perform to. So you can't say life is emptiness, therefore I don't need to go to work. I don't need to pay attention to my family. That's not what it means. Emptiness here is that things exist based on conditions. We have our affinity and the conditions for why we exist in this family. And so therefore, we provide the proper conditions. In order, if you want a happy, healthy family, then you have to provide love and care. If you want that family to be broken, your family is broken, then yeah, mistreated and it will break. So whether it's broken or it's a happy family is or the conditions that you provide to the family, right? So a happy family is not happy forever, meaning don't take advantage of it, but continue to provide attention, loving, and caring. And a broken family is not broken forever. It could be healed. It could be amended by providing the proper love and care. So because all phenomena are dependently arising, they lack or empty of intrinsic value characterized by independence and autonomy. In other words, nothing is autonomous, existent on its own. Nothing exists out of nothing. This equates sunyata and the notion of conditionality. Narajuna is the one who created the explanations for the very famous sutra, 大智论. 大智论, that's the sutra. 大智度论, sorry. Yeah. So it's one of three natures, existence. Okay, so essentially that's sunyata according to the explanations of the Princeton Dictionary. So emptiness is really, you can look at this in another way. Emptiness is really an opportunity or hidden potential. That's one of the books from, I think, the author Roach, I forget, but one it was shared to me, and that book is quite interesting. So he terms it hidden potential for emptiness, knowing that it is one thing. Well, knowing is one thing, seizing the opportunity is another. So conditions or affinities are needed for merit cultivation. It's not that you want to perform skillful deeds to help people that you will have the opportunity to do so. There are three criteria in order to have successful merit cultivation. That is, one is that your willingness to give. Two is you have an object, you have something to give. And three, that you have somebody to receive your gift. I've given this an example before. I went to the north, San Jose, to visit my friends, and I encouraged my friends to do giving to the homeless. And just we often do here, right? We go to LA missions, to LA, and pass out gifts during holidays. So one year I went up to San Jose area to visit my friends and encouraged them to do the same. So we went to Walmart. We bought gloves, we bought beanies, we bought a bunch of other items to help the homeless through the winter seasons because it was very cold. So we bought a whole bunch, maybe I think 100 packages. But we put them in packages enough for about 100 people. So we put in packages into individual 100 packages. We pack them in the car and we drove. I was not very familiar with the area because I don't live there. But my friend my friends were not used to going to homeless site to give out. So we didn't know where to go. We tried to look on the internet to look for a place, but we couldn't find it. So we looked, and based on the information we received from the internet, we went ahead anyway just to see if we could find anybody. We drove around for almost 2 hours. We couldn't find anybody to give. Can you imagine? Driving, and we tried to drive to the poorest places in San Jose. Driving for about 2 hours, we couldn't find anybody to give. So through that experience, I realized that if you don't seize the opportunity to do good deeds, there may not be a next time, right? Because we are so blessed, we are abundant with opportunities to give. That's why we don't think much of it. But through that particular experience, I couldn't believe that driving almost 2 hours, driving on trying to find anybody, we couldn't find anybody. And it was raining in a way, it was sprinkling raining that day. Maybe they were hidden, I don't know. But the fact was that we could not find anybody to give. And so when we are surrounded by opportunities to do goodness, we should take advantage of those opportunities and not let go, because there may not be the next time. Right? Because in order to complete a merit cultivation, we need to have three criteria. Your willingness to give, you have something to give, and you have somebody to receive that gift. Right? We had the willingness to give, we had things to give, but there were no recipients. So therefore, our effort was not very successful, right? So what I did was I took home a bunch of them home back to LA to go to LA Mission to downtown LA to pass them out. So we are very blessed here to have a lot of opportunities. The COVID-19 lockdown is making it very difficult to go out and volunteer to help others. I mean, look at how things have changed, right? If you want to go out and help others, you have the willingness and the gifts, your money, your time. You say, yes, I want to do something good for the world. But people may not want you to be physically close to receive your giving, right? You want to take care of them, you want to help, you want to feed them, but they don't want you to be there. So there's no recipient. So merit cultivations will not be complete if the three conditions are not met. Right? For those who earnestly want to perform merit cultivation to help others and currently do not have the means to do so, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will resonate with that great aspirations and will help us to open ways for us to help others. It will then be up to us to seize the opportunity. So when I say, even though there's the COVID-19 lockdown, it seems like the opportunities are not there, but it's not true. If you have the heart, the willingness to do good, there will be opportunities, right? So it's not permanent that there are no opportunities. The only thing we should ask is, do we have the willingness to do good deeds, to help others, to learn, to go beyond our egoism? So that's emptiness, is that really opportunity. There's nothing fixed. It's only do we have the drive, the motivation to do good deeds. When we do, we want to learn. We want to learn so that we can serve others, we can help others, so that we are more capable in helping others, then opportunities will open up. So the three conditions represent different aspects of the unconditioned. The different points of view, different ways of realizing it, right? Many roads lead to Rome, so to speak. So you penetrate into the unconditioned through the unbiased, through the signless, and through voidness. And you attain the unconditioned by knowing the conditions in its depth. You understand it. So you look deeply enough at the essentially unsatisfactory nature of conditioned existence, you realize the unconditioned as being without bias. You lose interest in the goals and the aims and purposes of conditioned existence. Right? Those 5 desires, right? Fame, fortune, so forth, will no longer satisfy the craving for something that's of meaning, of high value. Right? And you concentrate on the unconditions as being impermanent, transitory, and you come out the other side, so to speak. You realize the unconditions are signless. Realizations that it is empty of concepts, and that you transcend all thought. If you concentrate on the conditions at devoid of self, void of I, devoid of you, devoid of me, devoid of mind, then you realize the unconditioned is sanatta, which is voidness, which is emptiness, opportunity. So according to the Buddha, we don't really see the conditioned existence until we learn to see it through these terms. So in other words, in order to get to liberation, to see things clearly as how they are, we have to see it through the lens of impermanence, the lens of dukkha, satisfactoriness, and the lens of emptiness, through the view of it. If we see anything else, that is just an illusion, just a projection. So in other words, if you see anything beyond impermanence, emptiness of the self, and dukkha, if we cannot see through those 3 lenses, then it's just an illusion. It's not reality. So once we start to see the conditions as essentially unsatisfactory, impermanent, and empty of self, little by little, we begin to get a glimpse of unconditioned. So let me go back and expand on this a little bit here. And why do we want to choose liberation? Why are we seeking liberation? And what is it that we want to be liberated? Because when we liberate, I mean, there's something that we want to go beyond. There's something that we're not happy about this state. And when we seek liberation, it can sound really pessimistic because you want to leave this happy place. And we should avoid pessimism when we seek liberation. When we study this topic, we should avoid pessimism. We should understand that Buddhism is lively and active, right? And it's not passive. It's not evading life. It's not to run away from life. When we seek liberation, it does not mean that we are evading life. We're running away from it. The Buddha opens up the road of spiritual liberation, and we are always aspire towards the same goal of spiritual liberation and enlightenment. That's the right thing to do. So usually, when a person seeks liberation, it is because one is currently in a binding or restricted state, right? One is not in a state of liberation. That's why one seeks liberation, because one is not does not feel liberated. Therefore, in order for one to search for liberation, one must first understand one's current state. If you want to achieve something, you should first understand the state that you're in, so that you can make your next step. If one does not recognize that one is currently in a state of suffering and binding, then the search for liberation is meaningless. There's no motivation, because you don't feel that life is dukkha enough to search for it. You may search for it, but then it won't last, because there is no motivation behind it, because you don't truly understand your current state of being. However, it is not only when one truly recognizes one's state of suffering and restriction that it is only through understanding it that one is inspired for liberation and wisdom. So if one does not understand the principle of dukkha, of the Four Noble Truths, then one is not so motivated for liberation. So why does Buddhism teach life dukkha? Well, one may say that life is not all about suffering or dissatisfaction. There are happy times. And there are sad times, yes, true, but there are happy times. So it's not always sad times, it's not always suffering. So why did the Buddha definitively claim that life is dukkha? Life is satisfactoriness. Isn't that too extreme? They may ask. With such an extreme view, wouldn't that make Buddhism pessimistic and passive? Because you just want to leave, you want to have nothing to do with this world. It can lead to confusion. So before we answer this question, let's review something very fundamental. So where does suffering come from, right? We can say life is suffering, well, where does suffering come from? Where does it come from? Well, in the Four Noble Truths, we learn that it comes from selfishness. Any selfish craving will eventually lead to dukkha. For example, a student is leaving class to go to the next class, and then the teacher gives him some angel cake to enjoy. As he walks in to his next class, he starts to consume his cake. And he will be meeting with his friends, and he doesn't want to be asked about sharing that cake with his friends. And so he starts to devour the cake. So in this kind of behavior is called selfish craving, because he wants to enjoy it all by himself. He doesn't want to share with others. He doesn't think about the joy of his friends sharing the cake with him. So with selfish craving, it leads to suffering. How so? The first thing that he creates is that before he can finish enjoying the cake, there's worry. Right? There's already anxiety of having to share the cake, so he has to eat it fast. If he doesn't eat fast, he's going to have to share it, and there's not going to be joy in sharing his cake. He wants to consume all the cake. So the first thing that happens in that selfish craving is anxiety, right? He may think he's enjoying the cake, but actually, in reality, he is encountering anxiety, right? So because he worries about having to give away what he likes, so that's anxiety. But if he had no cake, he wouldn't have to worry about, right? If there was no selfish craving, he wouldn't have that worry. So this is dukkha in the present time. In the future, due to the law of causality, the law of cause and effect, he may face disappointments and failures because he has done unskillful deeds, right? In the future, potentially, when people have something to share, something good opportunity for joy and wealth, they may not share with him, or they may not meet him to share with him. He may, when the opportunity arises, he may be in a different location and not be informed of it, and he will be isolated without supporting resources. Therefore, selfish craving leads to suffering, right? It leads to anxiety in this life for knowing that you're going to lose something, you don't want to lose it, and then through the unskillful deeds that you are planting, right, the unskillful karmic seed for suffering in the future. Another consequence of selfishness is demerit or sin. Sins are produced from mistakes or unskillfulness in one's karma with an action, speech, or thought. And sins are restrictions that inhibit us from getting what we want, such as preventing success from surfacing. With sins, anywhere a person turns, it's obstruction. Anywhere you turn, you face obstruction. People don't support you, or you don't have enough resources to become successful. That is lack of merit, and that's what sins do to you. Whatever he does, he encounters obstructions or failures. This is a state of lack of merits and karmic rewards. Therefore, sinful or unskillful deeds deplete merits. On the other hand, an altruistic person will do skillful deeds because it's selfless. And the result is merit because that person wants to help other people. So a person with merits, whatever he does, he enjoys the sweetness of success. He will encounter timely assistance to get what he is looking for. Therefore, one could say that merit equates to freedom. Right? When you have karmic rewards, you are free from the constraints in life. You want a car, you get a car. You want support, you get support. On the other hand, we can ask, well, why is a person in prison, as an example, to help us understand this concept? Well, it is because he has committed a crime or violated the law. So his imprisonment is restriction. On the other hand, why are we free? Well, because we did not violate any law, so we don't have to live in fear. Similarly, if we lack merits and wealth, we won't be able to buy a new car to replace the currently broken one. And our travel will be limited and restricted. Right? If we have karmic rewards, even if we don't know how to drive, someone will take us from place to place anytime that we want. Right? That's a person of karmic rewards or merits. And a person who may not know the language arriving at a new land, right? But because his merits, he will receive and he will be able to attract help, support, and the conditions for him to thrive. Right? And I've seen many cases of this. Person coming to the United States not speaking any English, word of English, through a few years of hard work and his merits, he has become successful. I mean, those are very common examples. So it's not through conniving, it's not through scheming, tricking people that you become wealthy, but it's through your merits that you become wealthy. So therefore, we can conclude that marriage equates to freedom in life. Freedom means liberation. So the more altruistic, the more selfless a person is, the more that person becomes accommodating and would tend to give, to share. And therefore, that person will perform more skillful deeds and will earn more merits and therefore will have more freedom. If the person is completely selfless, that will lead to infinite merit and wisdom, ultimate liberation, and eventually Buddhahood. So sins lead to restrictions, whereas merit and wisdom lead to freedom. However, we should note that helping others to earn merit for oneself and seeking freedom for oneself with a selfish agenda, not caring about others, are mistakes that go against the spirit of Buddhism. That does not lead to liberation. So in order to achieve liberation, one must practice altruism, selflessness. I mean, why did the Buddha leave the royal palaces to search for liberation? Because of sentient beings. He did not seek liberation for himself. He realized that the meaninglessness of being stuck in the cycle of life and death, the samsara. A typical cycle is that a person is born, he or she grows old and dies, and then is reborn again and again, and sometimes in different realms. And sometimes there is happiness in life, and sometimes there's sadness, but there is no remedy for death, and so the cycle of life and death continues. So there are many humanitarian organizations around the world that recognize the suffering of the world, and they spend a great deal of effort to alleviate sufferings of the world, such as providing food and shelter to the homeless, and saving environments, and even resolving tribal conflicts and wars. Of course, their efforts are great and worthy of praises. However, from the Buddhist perspective, the sufferings that they are trying to resolve are only a small degree of suffering of sentient beings. The greatest suffering that the Buddha realized was being stuck in the samsara, right? The aimless and endlessness, wandering in the cycle of life and death. That is the greatest suffering for all sentient beings. So in the hardships and the suffering that you endure to pursue the 5 desires, there is no guarantee that they remain unchanged and follow you forever. Right? You can still encounter pain and suffering. However, once spiritually liberated with enlightenment to the law of conditionality, one may encounter physical pain naturally due to the natural decay of the physical body, but one does not suffer. When the Buddha said that life is suffering, he was referring to the endless suffering in the samsara, not because a person has no food to eat, or even if the person has no food to eat, or even if the person has food to eat, there is suffering because he cannot be liberated from that cycle of life and death. So in some scriptures it says that if the tears from the sentient beings shredding during funerals of loved ones were collected, it would overflow the great 4 oceans. So this is based on this Asu Sutras. So countless tears and sacrifices from sentient beings do not stop the continuation of suffering in the cycle of life and death, which is why such enduring sufferings in the pursuit of the 5 desires and selfish craving are meaningless. It is indeed suffering for the homeless, the abused, and the family torn, etc. But the greatest suffering for sentient being is the endless cycle of life and death. So it is like a nightmare that you encounter every day. You wake up, but you know that at night, when you go to sleep, you're going to encounter the nightmare. 1 or 2 times may be okay, but if you know that for the rest of your life, you're going to be encountering nightmares every time you go to sleep, it's a torture. So even the joy in watching one's favorite movies can turn into suffering. And that is the fragile nature of joy in the samsara. I don't mean to be pessimistic about it, but I'm not sugarcoating it. That is the reality. It may be pleasant initially, and I'm not disputing the fact that there is some pleasantness in life, but is it worth it? That's the question we should ask ourselves. It may be pleasant initially, But if we are forced to continue to watch movies without rest, that joy can quickly degrade and turn into suffering. Right? The body gets tired and it wants to get some sleep, but the sounds and the lights on the TV are disturbing and preventing us from resting. And if that continues endlessly, it will become a torture. Right? At that point, we will even want to get rid of letting go of watching our favorite movies, which we thought were joyful, in order to find peace and quietness. Right? So the joy that we have is we should understand that joy because of conditions, and we have to maintain the conditions. But we should not be attached to it, thinking that it will last forever. So we understand that joy and suffering do not come from the outside nor within. This means that nobody can make us joyful or suffer. And we are not destined for joy or suffering. It's not permanent. As we've learned from the discussion on the sense consciousness, joy and suffering come from our sense organs coming to contact with objects or dharmas or phenomena with the added consciousness. You have attention to it, you cause rise to contact. This is called contact. And there's nothing wrong with the world. There's nothing wrong with the beautiful car that you drive. There's nothing wrong with the beautiful shirts, outfits that you wear. Nothing wrong with that. Where it becomes problematic is when we allow our contact to turn into attachment or aversion. We become attached to the car, right? And we become attached to our outfits. If somebody criticizes our outfits, we become offended. And that's where it becomes problematic. There's nothing wrong with representing yourself beautifully to the world, right? So there are so many factors to produce effects. So we should understand that there are things that can change, that we can change and influence, while there are things that cannot be controlled. We should understand that. And so it is impossible for one to try to control all those factors. Those factors, what you call here, result from the 5 niyamas, or the natural law and cosmic order. So why are we studying this? I think this part here is important because by understanding these 5 niyamas, it helps us to avoid the delusions that we need to control everything in order to make things right. Right? In order to have happiness, you have to have control of everything. That is the delusion. And we'll see why. The first is called the Utu Niyama. And this is non-living matter. So this is called physical or inorganic order of existence. This is what you also call academically speaking, is called laws of physics and chemistry. Okay. So in other words, whether you are there or not, here or not, the moon continues to rotate around the earth. Whether you are here or not, the earth will continue to rotate around the sun, right? So that's not something you can control. The second niyama is called Bita Niyama. And here, Bita is called seed. And that is what we call, this is called the physical organic order, constitute the science of biology. Okay? So no matter how much merit or wisdom you have, the physical body will grow old and it will die. Right? You cannot say, I'm going to cultivate merit, I'm going to have enlightenment so that I can preserve this body, I won't grow old, I won't die. However, there is merit in merit cultivations and wisdom cultivation, is that there may be pain, while there may be pain from the decay of the physical body, but there is no suffering. Right? The third one is called Sita Niyama. Sita calls the mind. And this is what we associate, we know that in today's terms, like psychology, the study of psychology nowadays. And then the fourth is called Karma Niyama. This is karma, actions, karma, law of cause and effect. And so it is traditionally said sometimes karma is equivalent to satana. Satana is egoistic drive, xing. Right? Hopefully you can see it. It's called consciousness. Consciousness or subconsciousness. And behind that is a drive to create karma. And then the fifth is called Dhamma Niyama, and for example, it means spiritual or transcendental as opposed to the mundane. An example is that that many legends report that when the Buddha gained enlightenment, and also when he died, that and also in other in other occasions, that the earth shook and trembled 6 different ways. So it's just a natural phenomenon that happened when the Buddha realized that. So as we've seen that there are many things, there are things that we can change and influence, but there are things that we cannot control. Right? So trying to control everything is delusional. Non-delusion is to have proper expectations and provide proper conditions. For example, if you don't want to have car problems, then don't own a car, right? If you don't want to have illness, old age, and death, then don't have this physical body. But of course, it's not very realistic. This doesn't mean that we should just stop everything in order to avoid having problems. That's not what I mean here, because it's not realistic. We have a life to live. What is realistic is to have a proper expectations and proper conditions. Right? So, for example, we need a car. Of course, we can get a car, but get an affordable one within one's merits or within one's financial reach, and have enough reserve cash in reserves for repairs and maintenance. Plan it accordingly. Right? Don't get a car that's too expensive that exceeds your financial reach, and therefore you can avoid afflictions. Right? So we cultivate merits and wisdom to counteract the effects of illness, old age, and fear of death. Spiritual liberation provides the strength for us to absorb and neutralize the suffering of illness, old age, fear, and death. A proper expectation and delusion. For example, we ask a friend to do something, but that person is being defiant and does not want to follow our order. So we think that by yelling at him or using threat that it will subdue him. This may work temporarily out of fear of that person, but this is delusional and karmically unskillful. It's delusional because of the thinking that using physical power can produce desired effect. It's an illusion. It's unskillful because it ruins the friendship in the present time and planting a karmic seed of suffering for the future for ourselves, right? So the proper thinking here is that our friend does not listen to us. Well, it is perhaps we lack merits, karmic rewards, and affinity with that person to get that person to want to help us. So because there are people who speak softly and yet can motivate the word. They don't use threats. They don't use harsh words to motivate people, right? There are people who don't even need to speak a word, but the stare of their eyes is powerful enough to command fear and respect of others, right? So using threats, using harsh words is not a way. That's delusion. It's not a way to get what we want. So by being in the presence, we can't do much but to agree and respect them. Those have have abundance of merits, wisdom. Therefore, to think that the strength of command comes from yelling, threatening, and forcing others is delusional. Right? One gets what we want. One gets what one wants because of one's karmic rewards and affinity, not because through threats. Right? So a wealthy or powerful person who gets what he or she wants thinks that is because she or he is naturally smart and it's his own natural ability. That is delusion. It is through their merits that because once their merits are depleted, they will lose the support. When they still have their karmic rewards, they can do all kind of bad things, and people will have fear of reporting them and will continue to support. But once they have depleted their merits, the support is gone. And we have seen this many times, in the news media, right? Powerful Hollywood figures, right? They abuse people, but they got away with the abuse. People wouldn't report them, but once they have depleted the merits, people start to report on them, right? So we've seen it many times. So the proper expectations and conditions is that in order to avoid wealth deficiency, if you want to have enough to live, and then provide the conditions of giving, right? Share internal and external possessions with those in need. Practice selflessness, right? To avoid intelligence deficiencies, provide the conditions of knowledge sharing, such as enabling others to become capable. And to avoid emotional and mental strength deficiency, then provide the conditions of fearlessness. For example, fulfilling our responsibilities and nourishing the trust that people have in us. They count in us, we deliver. That is a practice of giving fearlessness. They don't have to worry about us. They can say, we made a promise, we're going to deliver. And therefore, because of that, they trust us. They don't have fear that we're going to fail them. That is also a practice of giving fearlessness. So the purpose of merit cultivation is not to, the purpose of merit cultivation is to eliminate selfish craving, not for karmic rewards, not for ourselves. Karmic rewards are just byproducts and not the primary motivation. You help people, it's just naturally that you have help. You don't have to seek for help. So loving kindness plus compassion leads to joy. But if we can let go of that joy, it leads to equanimity. Right? So this is a very powerful formula for joy. Joy does not come from accumulating wealth. Joy does not come from buying friends, but it's through loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness is when people suffer, we provide what they need to eliminate their suffering. Compassion is to help them to achieve happiness, to enable them, to share the Dharma with them so that they become self-sufficient. And when they become successful, we become joyful. Right? We don't get jealous that they have surpassed us. Because the point in helping them is to make them successful. And if they're successful, we have achieved our goal. Therefore, it naturally leads to joy. If we don't have loving kindness and compassion, any success that we see in other people will lead to jealousy. Therefore, if we want to have joy, we need to practice loving kindness and compassion. And we should go beyond that, not joy for ourselves, but we should go beyond that to equanimity. So altruism leads to equanimity, and egoism leads to suffering. I have another note here that I want to share with you before we end, is regarding liberation. So the Buddha realized that joy in the samsara is limited and non-lasting, and he opened ways for himself and others to achieve liberation. So having a goal is one thing, and actually pursuing goal is another thing. And sometimes we're not perfect, so sometimes we will stray away from our goals. And how do we know that we are no longer pursuing a goal, and that we are, and to achieve the state of non-regression is that we should observe our own behavior. Our mindset is a reflection of our pursuit in our everyday life. We may still be egoistic at times. We are not perfect, right? But our mindset should always be in the direction of altruism. For example, if you want to go to San Francisco from Los Angeles, you can take the 5 interstate. And the 5 interstate is not a direct from south to north, right? Sometimes it curves towards the east and towards the west. But when you are curving toward the east, you're not facing north. And when you're curving towards the west, you're not facing going east. But you're still on the 5 north going north. So sometimes we have this egoism, that selfishness that consumes us. And that's okay, because we're not perfect. But we know that we are not heading north right now, but we should not give up our pursuit, because it will correct itself. Because the 5, if we stay on the 5, we don't exit, we will continue to get to the north, right? So sometimes we stray away from our goals and our altruism. And how do we know that? Well, we observe our behavior. We stray away from our goals is when we allow jealousy to arise, craving, selfish craving to arise, right? Arrogance, complacent, not willing to learn. So with the ego still in control, there are all these things here, jealousy, arrogance, complacence, are always lurking in the background of our minds, waiting for opportunities to pop up. When we don't have that mindfulness of ourselves anymore, we don't observe our behavior, we don't have constraints, those things will pop out. It's very easy to deviate from altruism. So through observing our behavior, being mindful of our morality and ethics, it helps us to maintain our pursuit that we don't give up. Another way to check ourselves is that, do we rejoice in the success of others? When people are successful, are we happy for them? And that's another way. And for example, when we have an opportunity to help somebody to become successful, because that person that we know has the ability and the willingness to do good deeds. And although that person didn't help us before, we should try our best to help that person. And even if it means that we might not be in the spotlight of attention, we should still help that person because it's the right thing to do, right? Because we know that that person's success can bring many benefits, more benefits than one can bring to the world. And so therefore we should help that person because it's the right thing to do. So it's a team thing, right? Whoever can bring the result, best result for the team, we should help that person. So a bodhisattva, a person who has achieved enlightenment and liberation, will rejoice and will be altruistic. And their rejoice and their altruism are naturally powerful enough to overcome the ego. And then another is, are we accommodating enough? And do we criticize others for their shortcomings? Bodhisattvas don't do that. And that we are not attached to our own method and criticize other people's methods. Right? We have affinity with this method, and this is what fits us, and we don't say this is the best and other methods are not. So what's the purpose of spiritual liberation? Oh, it is for the benefits of others. Right? Self benefits are just not the natural byproducts of helping others. Why is that? Because in order to truly have spiritual freedom and to be realistic, there needs to be physical freedom as a foundation. Right? If our lives are not emotionally and financially stable, it's very difficult to have spiritual calmness and joy. Right? And the physical freedom here comes from one's own merits. Right? The merits comes from morality and ethics, of precepts and helping others. And that helps to lead to a state of altruism. So perfect altruism is a state of complete liberation or a state of no dukkha. Okay? So we learn about the 3 doors of liberation today. 3 doors of liberations are well, through the lens of, in order to have insight, to get to liberation, we need to have, we need to see through the lens of impermanence, emptiness of self, and dukkha. And the 3 doors of liberation, and it will lead us to the 3 doors of liberation. And those are first, wishless, and signless, and emptiness. And it is, if we look at the world and we don't come back to those 3 fundamental elements of dukkha, impermanence, and emptiness of individual self, then we don't see true reality. It is our own delusion, right? So when we learn this, another thing that I want you to take away from this is that whatever you have is conditioned, based on conditions. and you want something, then if you want something that you prefer, then give the right conditions. Right? Things happen for a reason. And through our seeing, that we can understand reality by seeing through the lens of impermanence, emptiness, and dukkha. And it is not pessimistic, because behind that is the motivation for self-liberation and others. And the self part is just a natural byproduct of helping others. All right. We will continue next time. Are there any comments? Yeah. Yeah. So Cindy was asking about all the latest current events with the protest and the unfairness of society, mistreatment in society. We as Buddhists, what should we do? Right. So we should, in my opinion, we should understand that things happen for a reason. Just like the example we just gave of seeing a homeless. Well, you see a homeless, what do? Do you beat down the government's door and and blame them? Well, we see the unfairness, and that should be a reflection of ourselves. Like, do we treat other people fairly? Do we treat ourselves fairly? And what can we do to help that? Because so many things that happen that are beyond our control. And while there's sadness in our hearts that there's fairness, unfairness in the world, mistreatment in the world, and I will tell you, there will always be unfairness and mistreatment. When we see, you can see the George Floyd event as unfairness, as something bad, or something that we can learn from, right? You can see it with frustration, or you can see it with knowledge gaining perspective. We can use it to gauge how civilized our society has become, or maybe a lack thereof, from that perspective. Because if there are no such events, we would not be awakened to the reality that there's fairness, that we need to do something. So Cindy was saying that there are people who create these problems, and there are people saying if you don't do anything about it, you are part of the problem. Well, you have to ask, it's not that we lack the motivation to do anything. It's like, what do you want me to do? Right? First of all, I'm willing to help. You need money, I'll give you money. But we don't have the political strength to go and campaign something. Like, I know I don't. But I try to do my part. For example, by sharing this with you, and hopefully it will resonate with somebody to trigger something. Hopefully it will motivate somebody who's more powerful enough to do something. But I know that I will I will use this to learn, so that I'll be more conscious of my action towards other people. We put others in our people's in ourselves in other people's shoes, so that we don't mistreat them. But expecting a child to go out and do something is not realistic. A child has certain capability, right? We have to understand the conditions, right? We are expecting a child to do something. It's like, well, the family is not working, and you expect the child to go to work. It's not possible, and you can't blame the child for that. Yeah.
You just talk about like all things are dependently arisen.
Mm-hmm.
So thing happens with
Right.
probably we just before we try to do anything or to barge in, maybe we should just back and
Right.
say.
I mean, we have this event that it came to fruition, and people are frustrated, and they want resolution. Well, it has taken a lot to come to this point. So it's not like you can just melt an iceberg one day. It has taken millions of years to form this iceberg. And you can't just melt it in one day.
I understand these people that are putting all these saying, we should do something. It's so unfair, power to the Black people. And that there's a mistreatment of. But I think I'm having a. I know I don't have the power to go out there and protest. I mean, I'm working.
But what are we protesting?
Exactly. That's why I don't understand why some of these people.
Because there were some specific people who did wrong things, and we're blaming the entire system.
Right.
That's what I'm feeling.
Right. I'm just having a hard time with these people that are just. I almost feel like they're stirring the pot some more so that there's more issues.
And then there are people who out there who want attention, and they want to stir up something. Who knows, for their own personal agenda or whatnot.
So I guess I'm just wondering, what should us as Buddhists be doing at a time like this? I don't want to engage with these people. I feel like it's just going to create more problems.
Right. For a person to say, I'm so frustrated because you're not doing anything about it. Well, that's not skillful because you're being emotional about it. Right? So what we should do is to do the right thing.
Which is?
And it's
nothing?
No, everybody's different. I'm standing up here, propagating loving kindness. That's one thing we can do. Treating our friends and family with kindness. That's something we can do. Expecting us to fly into space is not realistic. Expecting us to donate $1 million to this cause or $100 million like Michael Jordan did is not realistic because I don't have that much. But donating a few $100s, a few $1,000s, yes, I can do that. It's within my reach. Right? Giving away my possessions is not impossible. It's not possible because I don't have that ability. Right? And that's things that we can do, and we shouldn't be emotional about it. We just do our best, do the right thing, things that is within our control. For example, like the environment, this environment with pollution. If you see the big picture, you're going to put a lot of stress on yourself, and the future will be very gloomy, and it will demotivate you from doing anything. So we should, in my opinion, we should do things cleverly to keep the momentum. It's not a one-day showdown to resolve it all, but how do we live every day to a better future?
It saddens me.
Yeah. And if we get angry because people are angry, then that is unskillful on our part too. If we blame them because it causes uprising, then that is unskillful on our part. So when we just try our best to do what is it that we can do, right? To share the concept of loving kindness with our friends and family, those who can trust and accept our teachings, our sharing. For me to go to some organization and start sharing this, they're going to throw me out the door so quickly because I don't have that ability. And what should I do? I continue to knock on the doors and force this down their throats to accept? No, it's not effective. Just like, for example, we go to LA missions, and we give. We built a very good relationship with them over the last 20 years. But we never introduced Buddhism to them. We just go there, give them food, and they're very thankful. Foods, clothing, all that stuff. For the past, I think, 15, 18 years, we've been doing that. We never say, if you're going to accept this, come to our lectures, or be part of our organizations, then we'll continue to support. We don't do that. I try, when they were talking about it, and I try to hint to them meditations, and they say, when they say meditation, they say, we don't accept, we are Christians here. Okay, that's fine. I was just gonna introduce some books on meditation to you. But they said, no, okay, that's fine. You know what? No hard feelings. So I know that the timing is not right, the fitness is not right, but for us to say, we've been supporting you for these past 15 years. and you're not accepting our teachings, what is up with this? That is not altruism. It's not like we're helping them because to inflate our own ego or to expand our own presence. We help them because they need help. Simple as that.
I'm going to quote some words from a song, my favorite song. It says, the song's name is The Rose. I think a lot of people heard about that. It's like, just remember, in the winter, far beneath the bitter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love in the spring becomes a rose. So we all heard about, in other words, saying like the worst times can be the best times. It totally depends on how you do is how you do is your perspective and your heart, your mind. I think it's like a mindful thing. Okay, so we might not be, big enough, strong enough to totally change a lot of like the society or even one school or one company, but at least we can do a little something to seize any chance possible. I mean, when it comes to natural, okay, you just use that chance to benefit even one part around you, and that part might become seed, and it's grows. So we can. This is what I'm thinking. Because, for example, I'm a school teacher. I'm thinking, I actually collected all the students, phone numbers and addresses and their birthdays. I'm thinking during the summer, this is a very difficult summer for them. Okay, so I'm going to, what can I do? Okay, no more online distance learning thing and no more Google Meet or Zooming or something. So at least when I think about, oh, this week is, we have 2 kids with this birthdays, and I probably I can into buy a little something and just put them at their doormat, and then call them and say, okay, something like that. I don't know. I think if I were a kid, that might give me a little moment of happiness. I go, oh, somebody thinking of me.
Right. And sometimes people become frustrated and saying, you're not doing the job to help this. You're not doing anything, therefore you're part of the problem. When they have that kind of emotional response, I'm not sure whether they have that kind of emotional response because they want to make things right or because they want to make themselves feel better. If you have always done your best, try your best, and done everything right, you don't feel remorseful. And I've seen this at funerals where you've seen some family members at the funeral, they cry and they cry, but during the time that the deceased, the parents that's deceased, was still alive, they were never around to take care of that. And now they missed the opportunity to take care of it, so they are emotionally pouring out and thinking that will be enough to compensate for the lack of caring that they should have provided. So a person who is emotional like that, we have to put a question mark. Is that for themselves to make them feel better? That they're now trying to do something, trying to motivate people? Or is it because they want to do for the good cause of it? Right? So we shouldn't be emotionally tricked by that kind of agenda. Because if I'll tell you, if every day you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I have done the best I can. I try my best. I fulfill my responsibility. It's a very powerful feeling. And nobody can make you feel upset or like you haven't done anything. If you feel bad about it and somebody says that to you, then maybe you haven't done your deeds. Maybe you have not fulfilled your responsibilities. But if you have truly put in 110% supporting your family, others, and those around you, and the only thing they can expect is the best, and you have given your best, you don't feel bad. Right? If you always give, you don't feel bad because you don't give. So If we react to it and we feel bad because somebody's saying we're not doing enough to help, then perhaps we haven't done enough. But if you have truly done enough, then yeah, you won't feel bad. People cannot trick you into that kind of emotional trap.
It's just sometimes when I see these people that are acting like that, they're not that different from the very people that they're fighting against.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really the same thing. It's not helping because it's just emotion. It's all emotion. So yeah, we shouldn't feel bad. So if we do feel bad, then we should have that self-reflection and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, as opposed to just be gloomy and self-consumed, and can potentially lead to depression. All right, let's do merit dedication. If you could please join your palms, together we recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the past below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate. If you could please rise and we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida.